You've heard of the cooking show, hosted by the angry chef, Hell's Kitchen. But have you heard of Heaven's Kitchen? Ladies and gentlemen, it's Heaven's Kitchen, hosted by that happy chef, Comanche Trail Church of Christ's own, Greta Morrison.
All right, church family, we've had a lot of people ask about communion bread, and I said something to several people that we were thinking about doing a Martha Stewart type show with Greta. So Greta has volunteered. She's wearing the Comanche Trail apron here, and she's going to show us how we make our communion bread here. So if you would like to do that at home, I know we're going to be doing it because I'm already tired of the little styrofoam wafer or whatever. They say that's bread. I guess it technically is, but it tastes awful, and I really miss the communion bread. And apparently the secret's out because it was in the bulletin that Greta has been making that for years. Anyway, so she's going to show us. We don't want to make it too long a video, but we're going to have the ingredients popping up here. I have the file, but we just have to load it on here. And we'll leave it up for a long time at the end. We'll also have a link to it. But Greta, anyway, I'm going to let you take over, but this is making the communion bread. So what are some of the things that we got here?
Well, first of all, we need our ingredients. And the first thing we start off with is all-purpose flour. Do not use the self-rising flour because that has a leavening in it. It has baking powder in it. So you want to get something that says the all-purpose flour. And I also use salt in mine and olive oil and water. So the 4 ingredients make it. I tried several communion breads throughout when I was first getting started and had a lot of suggestions from the older ladies of things to improve it or things that they had done as a child or whatever. And so I played with some of that. And someone had a concern about the salt that I was using in the bread. And I want to tell you why I decided to go with the salt. In Leviticus 2, it says, every grain offering you bring to the Lord must be made without yeast, for you are not to burn any yeast or honey in the food offering presented to the Lord. You may bring them to the Lord as an offering of the first fruits. They are not to be offered on the altar as a pleasing aroma. Season all your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of the Lord your God out of your grain offerings. Add salt to all of your offerings. And so that is how I determined to use salt in there. Salt in biblical times was used for 3 things. It was used for a seasoning, it was used as a preservative, and a disinfectant. In fact, in Ezekiel, it tells us that he used to rub the babies with salt to disinfect the babies after they were born. So, anyway, it doesn't take a whole lot. I use the appliances that I use. You can use a blender, and I use a food processor. I did start out with the blender, and it just makes it a little bit easier. And I use a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and so you'll need your 1/4 teaspoon. I have a paring knife and a regular table knife, and this is what I use. People are wanting to know how I make the little perforated squares, and this is a tracing wheel that you use in sewing. And I tried different items and objects to try to get it the way I want it, and it just never did work. And I was thinking one day, what can make it better? And I went out to my sewing kit, and I found my tracing wheel and tried it out, and it worked perfectly. So if you have a tracing wheel and you like to try it, that's fine, but you don't really need it for your bread at home.
So Greta can use a hand mixer as well?
Probably not, because it's going to be a little bit thicker dough on the consistency, and it may not work in your blender unless you have a dough hook.
No, I meant a hand mixer thing.
Yeah, they do have them with dough hooks.
Okay, so that might work.
It's a thicker batter.
So a bigger, powerful, like KitchenAid style mixer. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That would probably work if you have the dough hooks that goes with it. The first thing that you will do, it takes a 1/4 cup of oil. And I do not use, I just use regular olive oil. I don't buy the extra virgin. And you want 1/4 of a cup. And I assume most of you know that there is 2 different types of measuring. There is one for dry and one for wet. So.
Well, I didn't know that.
There is. I got a little bit too much, so I'm going to take this lid off. Your liquids go into your cups like this. This is a Pyrex cup, or you can use Tupperware. Pour that in your blender or mixer or whatever you have. Oh, before you get started, turn your ovens on to 350 degrees so they can be warming. I already have mine warm, so go ahead and do that. And 1/4 of a teaspoon of your salt. And I've already got it measured out, 1/4 cup of water. And what this will do is it just get your oil and your water mixed together better. Now, before I get that started, you want a cup of flour.
So this would be a dry measure then, okay?
Yes. This cups right here, these are for dry measurements for your flour, sugars, or whatever you use to measure out. Get your knife, take the back of it, kind of pat it down, and scrape it off. Turn it.
We can pause it. We're back.
Okay. Turn your mixer on or your blender. And that mixes it well with you. Pour in your flour. And that is it. Now, I've already washed my countertop off. I like using the countertop. Tupperware has or used to have, and I know some people still have them, the roll mats, and they just slide for me. They don't work well. So I just wash the countertops off really good and use my countertop. So no special thing is required to roll out your dough.
Okay.
Now, before I roll it out with my flour, I take my hands and kind of knead it back and forth. And there's quite a bit of oil on it, and so it won't hurt your countertops at all.
Okay, it won't stick to your countertops. Okay.
And something else that I have found out, my dough rolls better after I do this for a little while, if I let it set for just maybe about 4 or 5 minutes. So we'll have Derek turn off our video for right now, and we'll let this set, and I'm going to wash my containers up. Welcome back. The next thing we need to do is right before that we do the roll out the dough, we're going to go ahead and prep a pan. And I just have a 9 by 13, well, not 9 by 13, just a cookie sheet. And I drizzle a small amount of oil on it. Not much, just a little bit. And get you a paper towel and smear it out. So you have a light coating of oil on your pan, and you'll set it aside so when you get ready, it'll be ready to go. Our next thing that we're going to do is we're going to flour our countertop. And we'll roll our dough over in the flour. And I hope that everyone has a rolling pin. These are really nice to have. I use mine nearly every week for one thing or the other. And if you don't, you probably could use something round in your kitchen. I know some people used to use Coke bottles or a can or something like that. So be creative on how you can do that if you don't own one. And you just start rolling it out. Keep it floured. You want to get your dough bigger than your pan. And so it'll go to be pretty thin. Think about pie crust if you've making pie crust before. If you see, I've got a hole in mine that I just tore. Don't worry about that. If it bothers you, you can get some water and repair that. You could just piece it together with the water or some on the edge. And I'll show you. I'm going to go and wet this. And I'll make a little patch. Now that I've got it rolled out and you're wondering, well, how am I going to get this onto there? The way that I've been doing it is I roll my dough over my rolling pin. Bring it up, lay it on, grab my edges of my pan and unroll. Now you can kind of straighten it out, get your fingers, and kind of make it fit toward the creases of your pan. Now you can take a knife, but I use my tracer wheel. And just so you know, I don't use this for sewing and for cooking. It is designated just for my cooking. Go around the edges. I go just a little bit high. And then carefully tear off the edges. I have that down. Now these right here, you don't have to worry about making your bread into little bitty pieces. Most of you will just roll it out and then put it on the pan, and I will save these edges, and I'm going to put them on this extra pan that I had prepared, and we can bake it. Now you're going to have to check your know your oven. And check it. Mine at the house, when I do 350, I I do mine exactly. I've got down to a science. I know that I need to cook mine for 11 minutes. The church ovens cook a lot hotter, so it's a shorter amount of time. But the way I do Sundays, I just eye the squares. And they don't have to be perfect. I bet some people are wondering how many pans does it take each Sunday morning to do communion. I make 1.5 pans, so I do 3 batches every other week, and so it's a batch and a half for a service. And each pan one time has an estimate, I try to figure it out one time, approximately 900 pieces. But if you'd like to have more than one piece on a Sunday morning, please feel free to do that. There's more than enough. Charlie Huffman, when he was up visiting, and he said, I just don't want a piece. I want the whole thing, and that is fine. I told him take as many pieces as you would like. And you ask if I ever goofed up? Yes. Sometimes I've had to throw a batch away for some reason or the other. It just didn't work out for me, and I've started over. I've done that on several occasions. It all tastes the same. It just doesn't look right. And there is a batch of bread. And I'm getting ready to put it in the oven. And like I said, I'm going to try the church ovens for about 9 minutes. Mine at the house is exactly 11 minutes. Now we'll wait. Our time is up, so we're going to take it out. And I did it for 8 minutes, and it is very, very brown. This is a lot browner, so I probably should have done it in about 7 minutes maybe here at the church. But one thing you need to remember, my son discovered, a hot pan looks the same as a cold pan. If you do make communion bread, something that you need to know that kids like to eat the scraps. If you make a pie crust or anything like that, kids really enjoy it, especially if you put a little butter, cinnamon, and sugar on it. Special treat. Now, one thing about the communion bread when you make it is that you need to cut it while it's still hot, because if you don't and it sets up, then it's just going to break apart and you won't get your nice squares. But that's what I use the paring knife for. It's a little sharper on the edge, and I just cut down and make my squares.
So you're squaring this so that it'll go on the communion tray?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have me a spatula, and I just pick it up while it's hot.
Oh.
And I put it in my dish. Now, if I was at the house and I was using this for communion, this is a little bit more browner than what I would use. I wouldn't use anything this brown to serve. I would start over. one thing about communion bread, it does freeze well. So if you wanted to make a bunch of this up and for your house and you said, well, it's too much for my family, you can make it, square it up, put it in a container, and you can freeze it and have it for the next several weeks. So there we have it. Our communion bread.
That's great. So Greta, how long, where do you need to store it? Do you need to store it in a refrigerator?
No, I store it in an airtight container.
So like a Ziploc if you have something like that?
A Ziploc bag. I usually don't put it.
Tupperware?
Yeah, Tupperware, some type Rubbermaid container, something like that. I even have some of the old cake tins that sometimes I use. It just depends on what's available, but I normally don't put it in a bag because I'm going to break it and crumble it up because just if accidentally hit something.
It doesn't store as well in a bag.
Yeah, and it still tastes the same. It just won't stay because it'll get bumped and hit, and you won't have your nice squares.
Yeah, every retreat we've had, they've been bits and pieces because I put them in a Ziploc bag and bring it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get you a butter dish or something, one of those plastic containers, and put it in there, and that's it.
Okay.
So, hope you all enjoy this, and God bless.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.